All right. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to join you today. The Subcommittee on Technology Modernization will come to order. I want to start by thanking our ranking member and the host today in your district, Ranking Member Budzinski, for welcoming us to Illinois' 13th District. I appreciate the hospitality and the welcome and everyone, and really just the warmth that I can feel for how you care for veterans and how you've welcomed us in the committee here today, and I really deeply appreciate all of that. I'd also like to thank the University of Illinois and the Ches Veterans Center for hosting us, and for all of the staff at the university that helped make this hearing possible. I know many of you went out of your way to put this together. And Colonel, I appreciate your willingness to help pull this together and everything that you did. Even though you were voluntold, I appreciate your willingness to step up and do that. And I appreciated our conversation earlier, really about that transition from military back into civilian life and what the challenges that some of our veterans face, whether they're on campus or not, and how we can do a better job of really making that transition easier for our veterans. I also want to thank Garrett Anderson, who's here. Where's Garrett? Very good. Garrett, thank you so much for taking me on the tour this morning. Really appreciate all of your very, very clear commitment to veterans and making sure that they are welcomed home and treated with the dignity that they need, and really transitioned as effectively as possible. So I can tell that you take a great deal of pride in that, and we appreciate your work in that regard, so thank you. The mission of the Technology Modernization Subcommittee is to make sure that VA is buying, using, and developing the right information technology in order to deliver the best care and services for our veterans. And that's the task that we have on this subcommittee, and it plays into why we are here today. Technology plays a huge role in delivering VA care to rural veterans because VA simply cannot give veterans all the care and services they need at traditional brick and mortar facilities that are often too far for veterans to reach or might not be as convenient to them because of their limitations for travel. This topic is also personal to me. I served 22 years in the United States Army, and I'm now building a family in a rural part of Michigan myself. I also represent Michigan State University in my district, so I do have to say a go green while I'm here. I know firsthand the frustration that veterans feel when the care they've earned is out of reach simply because of where they live. I actually do not have a VA hospital facility in the district that I represent, so the 800,000 or so residents of my district and the veterans there have to travel outside of my congressional district if they go to a VA hospital. That's what today is about, making sure rural veterans aren't left behind. The reality is, veterans in rural communities face serious barriers to accessing VA care. Nearly 1/3 of VA-enrolled veterans live in rural communities. They drive longer distances. They wait longer for appointments, have fewer providers to choose from, and deal with limited broadband and transportation options. However, each community is different, and rural veterans do not all have the same experience with the VA. So I'm glad the ranking member and I were able to take our subcommittee on the road and talk to you all where you live and learn about the specific challenges that you face. In Washington, we hear a lot of experiences from people, but I think we all benefit from going directly to the source for where things are happening. And that's a good reason why we're here today. One of the most important tools that exists for rural veterans is the Community Care Program. Community care allows veterans, especially those in rural and underserved areas, to see outside providers when brick and mortar VA facilities can't meet their needs. Community care is VA care, and millions of veterans rely on it every single year. Having used community care personally, I know there is room for improvement. I want to ensure every veteran watching this hearing knows that they only need to meet one of the several criteria to qualify for community care. One is if the VA does not offer the service that is needed. Another is if the VA facility is not in the area in which they are located. If the VA cannot schedule an appointment quickly enough or close enough to them, or if community care is in the veteran's best medical interest. Under the leadership of Chairman Mike Bost, chairman of this committee, whose district is not too far south of here, this committee is working hard to ensure that rural veterans are able to make their own choice on whether community care is the right option for them if they are eligible. In addition to community care, VA has many other resources that are important for rural veterans, including telehealth, mobile medical units, and much more that we will hear about today. Technology has a big role to play here, and that is where this subcommittee comes in. There are a lot of exciting opportunities for technology to drive better VA care and services in rural communities. A great example is the external provider scheduling system, which allows VA staff to see real-time appointment availability and book directly with community providers or within the VA system, depending on which is available first and closer to home. While it is only active at around 50 VA medical centers currently, it has empowered staff to schedule up to 4 times more appointments per day by eliminating delays, confusion, and honestly a game of telephone that goes back and forth. Another great example is telemedicine. When it comes to mental health, where isolation is a real risk, tools like mental health and remote monitoring are essential lifelines for veterans who otherwise might fall through the cracks. And I want to say I'm very impressed by the services you have here that allow veterans to access those services around other veterans who may have had a shared experience to them. So I think that's another important community aspect of this. But even with these tools, there is room for improvement. Reports from GAO and the VA Inspector General have shown that rural health programs lack clear performance goals, outreach strategies that are inconsistent at the VISN level, and community care referrals still take too long, especially in high-need areas like mental health and women's care that we're still trying to make strides in. Provider participation in VA cellular networks is also lagging, with some rural providers walking away due to red tape, poor communication, or late payments. We can't let bureaucracy or outdated processes get in the way of quality and timely health care. This subcommittee is committed to ensuring that VA's rural health programs are well managed, accountable, and truly reaching the veterans they're meant to serve. That means cutting the red tape, improving access to care, and ensuring every veteran understands their options for quality care and that we leave no veteran behind to figure this out for themselves. It also means ensuring the resources are there to sustain proven services and tools, like the external provider scheduling system, telehealth, transportation services, and others. My goal is to ensure every program is driven by measurable outcomes that validates better health outcomes, not just good intentions. In fact, we talked about that today earlier. There are so many veteran organizations out there, each with good intentions, sometimes duplicating services, sometimes duplicating intentions, and having a real drive to find out where we can get that done in the best way is really important. The bottom line is this: geography should never be a barrier to care. If a veteran qualifies for VA health care, it's our job to make sure they can get it without delays, without confusion, without frustration, and without giving up. We hear too many stories about veterans who've simply abandoned the benefits that they've earned because they can't untangle the confusion. I look forward to hearing from you all about how we can accomplish this today. Before I turn it over to the ranking member, I just want to remind everyone here that this isn't an open forum, but is a oversight hearing for members of Congress and the witnesses that are before us today. They will be testifying under oath, so this isn't a forum for individuals to participate. But I know, seeing as how we're in the ranking member's district, if you do have questions of your own, I'm sure she's available to work with you on those. And with that, I will yield to the ranking member for her opening statement, and thank you again for having us.
Thank you very much, Chairman Barrett, for coming to the 13th District. Welcome to Urbana. It's really great to have you here. I appreciate you making that trip. I also want to just echo a sincere thank you to the Shez Veterans Center and the leadership. I've had the privilege of visiting this center, and I know the important work that you're doing for veterans, student veterans on campus, and just want to say it's so special to be here having you host us for this field hearing. So I want to say a sincere thank you, and thank you to the University of Illinois. You know, Chairman Barrett's district and mine are probably very similar. He mentioned Michigan State, so I have to say go Illini, but very similar in a lot of different ways. And so I think that this forum, this panel, is going to be really, I think, really important to both of us, and we'll take all of this information back with us to Washington. So I look forward to a robust conversation about the experiences specifically for our rural veterans, gaps in access to care and benefits and resources that are available to bridge them. I want to also welcome our diverse panel of witnesses representing VA leadership, veteran service organizations, county and state programs, and most importantly, veterans. I'm grateful to all of you for being here, and I know that many of you traveled long distances to participate. Please know that I appreciate those efforts, and this conversation wouldn't be as productive without you, so thank you. For the rural veterans in the room, this type of travel is nothing new. Whether it's driving hours to the closest VA medical center or even farther for a compensation and pension exam. Rural veterans are unfortunately used to traveling to access the care and benefits they have earned through their service to our nation. I think something the chairman mentioned I share in common. Danville, Illinois is actually outside of my district, about 45 minutes from here, but is the closest VA hospital. So the 13th district is serviced by VA hospitals, but just outside of it. This is the biggest reason that I believe that community care, though, has to remain available to rural veterans. Unfortunately, community care access in rural America is not guaranteed. Due to financial issues and national provider and nursing shortages, rural health care is dying. Changes to Medicaid will only make it worse. According to the Center for Healthcare Quality and Payment Reform, 700 rural hospitals, a third of all rural hospitals in the country, are at risk of closing in the near future. Almost half of those are deemed at immediate risk of closing. In fact, Illinois has already lost 3 community hospitals in recent years, and 9 more have been deemed at immediate risk. We cannot have a conversation about community care without addressing the fact that it may not be there to take care of our veterans. I hope to hear from VA regarding its plans to ensure that veterans continue to have access to care. The work that Chairman Barrett and I do on technology modernization, on the Technology Modernization Subcommittee, seeks to help VA bridge some of these gaps through the use of technology. VA has long been a pioneer of telehealth, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, the department quickly pivoted to expand telehealth, which allowed many veterans to continue to receive much of their care. Unfortunately, telehealth is only a solution for veterans who have access to sufficient internet and the technical knowledge to use it. It's sad that in 2025, there are still parts of Illinois and the country that don't have access to broadband internet. Sadly, it's not just a rural America issue either. Even in places where broadband internet is available, it can be prohibitively expensive, especially for veterans living on a fixed income. I'm looking forward to hearing about our efforts to address the access and cost to make internet available to veterans so that they can access their care and benefits. I hope that we can have a fruitful conversation about these issues and possible solutions. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for being here, and I'll yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Bazinski, and I will now introduce our witnesses from the Department of Veteran Affairs. We have Mr. Daniel Zamchek, right? Did I say that correctly? The Executive Director of Vision 12 for this region. Thank you for being here. Accompanying Mr. Zamchek is Dr. Stacy Williams, the Executive Director of the Ilani Healthcare System. Did I say that right? Ileana. Sorry. My apologies. They even spelled it phonetically for me. So, yeah. I'm an Army grunt, so, you know, I was in the artillery. We just got to get close. And Dr. Peter Caboli, Executive Director of the Office of Rural Health. Thank you. We also have Mr. John Lawson, Army veteran and Superintendent of the St. Clair County Veterans Assistance Commission. Thank you. And Ms. Hillary Raines from the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. We met back in the coffee room earlier, so thank you. And I think you told me you traveled a bit of a distance to get here today, so appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Finally, have Mr. Kim Kirchner, an Air Force veteran from Girard, Illinois, and Ms. Christina Schauer, an Army veteran and co-founder of Tri-State Women Warriors. So thank you both for being here as well. At this time, I'll ask the witnesses to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Very good. Thank you, and let the record reflect that all witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Mr. Zamchek, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement on behalf of VA.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Good morning, Chairman Barrett, Ranking Member Budzinski, and our distinguished guests. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss VA's efforts to enhance the well-being of our rural veterans, especially within the VA Ileana healthcare system. As you announced, my name is Dan Zomchek. I am the Network Director of Vision 12. Joining me today are Dr. Stacy Williams from the VA Ileana healthcare system and Dr. Peter Caboli from the Office of Rural Health and VHA. I'd like to take some time to share some highlights about the work that we're doing within VA Vision 12 and specifically the VA Ileana healthcare system in providing essential care to our rural veterans. Having been with the VA for over 20 years and serving as the Network Director of Vision 12 for almost 3 years, I am deeply committed to our veterans and to our mission. We strive to ensure that veterans, no matter where they live, receive the top-notch care that they've earned and deserve. I'll start with the healthcare services provided by the VA Ileana healthcare system. This system has been a cornerstone within the Danville community for over 125 years, with a dedicated team of over 1,500 healthcare professionals taking care of about 30,000 veterans in the community. Covering 34 counties in East Central Illinois and West Central Indiana, we reach vets in both urban and rural areas. Over 24 of our sites across Vision 12 serve a population where more than half of those veterans are enrolled from rural areas. And given that 4.2 million of the 16.5 million U.S. veterans live in rural areas, our services play a crucial role in ensuring these veterans have access to the health care that they've earned and deserve. It's also important to note that veterans in rural areas enroll in VHA care at higher rates, that is 65%, compared to 47% for their urban counterparts. I'd like to touch on a few key initiatives that support rural veterans, starting with community care, as you mentioned. Through the Veterans Community Care Program, we ensure timely care closer to home via a network of over 1.4 million non-VA providers. The network here is vital for delivering hospital care, medical services, and specialty care, especially for those vets that need to travel long distances. We've streamlined referrals and improved care coordination to ensure quality and continuity. Next, telehealth, which was also mentioned earlier, and virtual mental health services have truly been a game changer for our veterans in rural and remote areas. VA has invested in telehealth infrastructure, enabling veterans to connect with primary care providers and specialists through platforms like VA Video Connect that we call VVC, reducing travel and improving health outcomes. We've also ramped up on virtual mental health services, including therapy, medication management, and crisis intervention, all critical for addressing the mental health needs of our veterans. And as a former VA psychologist and intern, this is a particular area that's of importance to me, is mental health. Lastly, on beneficiary travel, we recognize that getting to appointments can be challenging for our veterans in rural areas. VA's Veterans Transportation Service, or VTS, provides door-to-door rides for eligible veterans. Our highly rural transportation grants program helps vets to travel to VA medical centers. And the Volunteer Transportation Network, backed primarily by the Disabled American Veterans Organization, which is a fantastic partner for us and our veterans, offers free rides through volunteers. So that said, Chairman Barrett and Ranking Member Budzinski, I want to thank you for allowing me and us to share our efforts in assisting our rural veterans. With your backing, VA continues to expand its reach, ensuring more veterans receive the care that they've earned and deserve. We appreciate your commitment, and we look forward to discussing these points further during today's field hearing.
Thank you. And the written statement of Mr. Zamchek will be entered into the hearing record, and appreciate your testimony. Mr. Lawson, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement.
Chairman Barrett, Ranking Member Budzinski, and the members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the veterans of St. Clair County, thank you for the opportunity to provide remarks on challenges faced by veterans residing in rural America, and in our opinion, the best state for veterans, the land of Lincoln, the great state of Illinois. My name is John Lawson. I'm the superintendent of the Veterans Assistance Commission of St. Clair County, Illinois. I'm a VA accredited government veteran service officer through the National Association of County Veteran Service Officers. I'm also a life member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars Post 1739 in Belleville, Illinois, and currently serving as the VFW State of Illinois Legislative Co-Chairman and a life member of the Disabled American Veterans Chapter 24 in Freeburg, Illinois. I lead a small team of 5 other full-time veteran service officers who are fully invested in ensuring our veterans receive the benefits that they have earned and safeguarding them from predatory, unaccredited claims consultants. St. Clair County is unique in that while we do have a suburban feel and a significant active military presence at Scott Air Force Base, much of our veteran population exists in the small towns that dot rural Illinois. We consider ourselves very fortunate to have our VA community-based outpatient clinic, the CBOC, in Shiloh, Illinois, and one more forecasted to open in Scott Air Force Base. Even with these 2 facilities, our population of veterans from St. Clair County and surrounding counties have eclipsed the safe patient load our great care providers at the CBOC. Many veterans cannot use this facility due to these patient load caps. Coupling this limiting factor is a limited scope of care available at the CBOC that nearly always leads to a veteran being referred to a VA medical center for specialty or advanced care needs. Our veterans are served by the St. Louis VAMC that also serves over 110,000 eligible veterans on the Missouri side of the river. Although we understand that full-service VAMC on the Illinois side of the St. Louis Metro may not necessarily be in the cards for the nearly 104,000 eligible veterans of the Illinois 12th and 13th congressional districts, we do need a much larger footprint and improved service capacity for our veterans by way of a higher level of care facility that is able to accommodate our needs beyond routine physicals and blood draws. At my last count, we had 5 patient-aligned care teams at the St. Clair County CBOC with a max patient load of 6,000 veterans, with 2 additional patient-aligned care teams forecasted for the future Scott Air Force Base CBOC. This combined maximum patient load of 8,400 only represents about 33% of the eligible veteran population of St. Clair County, according to the 2023 VA GDX, and roughly 8% of the eligible veterans of the 12th and 13th congressional districts. The non-forecasted number is even more disappointing at approximately 24% for St. Clair County and 5% for the combined congressional districts without inclusion of the forecasted Scott Air Force Base CBOC. We do believe that H.R. 740, the Veterans Access Act of 2025, will be a good start for St. Clair County veterans, especially as our CBOC in Shiloh sits directly between 2 full-service hospitals less than 2 miles to the east or west, much closer than the nearest VAMC in St. Louis, Missouri, at 45 minutes to an hour away. We look forward to the subcommittee's help to help our veterans by working with the VA to direct the development of automated approvals of community care applications to reduce the time to approval, reduce travel, reduce the delays in receiving care, and also supporting the local community by veterans utilizing their earned VA compensation where it was intended, in that veteran's local community, not in another state. Additionally, we'd like to ensure that the veterans do not receive bills for this care when applicable. Negotiated reimbursements and payment submission portals for providers should be developed to ensure clarity of responsibility of payment for the provider and patient. Lastly, ensuring our VA electronic health records are two-way accessible to the VA primary care providers and the community care providers is essential in ensuring the best possible outcomes for our veteran patients. In situations involving advanced or specialty care, miscommunication between providers can cause irreparable harm to the veteran. I wish to emphasize that our support for the Veterans Access Act of 2025 is not to be an indication that we support substitution or privatization for direct VA care for our veterans. To be straightforward, we do not. Our support of this proposal is as a supplemental partnership with the community medical providers to ensure timely access to care and the best possible health outcomes for our veterans. It is important to remember that providing resources for care only in the community and not also for VA direct care can lead to a less capable VA, which is a detriment to our veteran care. In military terms, community care is a force multiplier when leveraged correctly, not a substitution. Chairman Barrett, Ranking Member Budzinski, this concludes my testimony. I've also submitted written testimony on other pending legislation matters for your review. I welcome any questions from you or members of the subcommittee.
And with 2 seconds to spare, we appreciate your testimony today. So did you time that out?
Yes, sir, I did. I'm a slow talker from the Ozarks. I'm surprised I got it out that fast.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being here. And the written statement of Mr. Lawson will be entered into the hearing record. Thank you. Ms. Raines, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Barrett, Ranking Member Budzinski, and distinguished guests. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity and the Illinois Office of Broadband. I'm here to talk about the critical intersection of telehealth access for rural veterans and the impact of the digital divide on their health and well-being. When we talk about the digital divide in 2025, we're talking about a disparity in access to fast, affordable, and robust internet, as well as to the devices, tools, and skills that allow people to connect to critical supports throughout their lives. Vulnerable populations often find themselves on the wrong side of this divide, and veterans, of course, are one of them, with only about 67% of Illinois veterans having and using broadband access. Veterans are often also part of more than one vulnerable population, as 56% are over the age of 60 and 26% nationwide, over 4 million people live in rural areas. Rural residents have their own challenges where internet connectivity is concerned. The FCC estimates that 28%, almost a third, of rural residents lack broadband access. 57% of rural locations in Illinois alone are entirely unserved or underserved, receiving internet speeds below the FCC's minimum recommendation of 100 by 20 megabits per second. This recommendation is indeed the bare minimum, as it's only often adequate for one user at a time to do everyday tasks like video conferencing, streaming, and emailing. The inability to complete these tasks from home disadvantages rural veterans, especially when trying to access telemedicine resources. The VA obviously provides vital care centers and hospitals across the country, but when we look at veterans who live in rural areas, they live an average of 45 miles, and that's an average, to be seen in person at a VA center. And as veterans are twice as likely as non-veterans to suffer from 2 or more chronic health conditions, frequent checkups and appointments are especially important. Telehealth resources began to be promoted heavily just before the pandemic to alleviate those challenges with transportation and provider availability, but adoption rates in rural areas suffered because of the lack of broadband access. When considering additional complications such as subscription affordability, device ownership, and varying degrees of digital literacy and skill, especially in the more than half of veterans over 60, the problem is laid out in stark relief. Illinois has already worked diligently to increase broadband access for rural residents through the Connect Illinois Broadband Infrastructure Grant. Connect Illinois allows internet service providers to build high-speed fiber infrastructure in rural areas that often have low population or subscriber density and are isolated from middle-mile infrastructure. As of today, 3 state and federally funded rounds of this program have connected approximately 7,500 households, with 46,000 total more to be connected over the next 3 years. The 4th round is currently being funded by the Federal Broadband Access, Equity, and Deployment Act, you might have heard BEAD, program, and stands to connect over 165,000 Illinois residents and almost 5 million other households across the country without adequate connectivity. While the BEAD program is in progress, there is another program that can fund veterans serving organizations on the ground and help to provide rural residents with device access, digital skill building, one-on-one troubleshooting support, and more. That program is the Digital Equity Act. This program was poised to provide $2.75 billion to states to support programming and subgrants to direct service organizations, with veterans being targeted as one of the vulnerable populations most affected by the digital divide. Illinois was to receive more than $23 million to equip households and residents with the skills, resources, and tools needed to use the high-speed internet. Illinois received over 260 subgrant applications throughout the state, with the full ask over $100 million, far outstripping the available funds, showing the need. Some of the programs proposed were to support telehealth and resource access for recently separated women veterans in the rural Southwest Central region, veteran-focused digital literacy classes, mobile skill building hubs, and secure community telehealth rooms. Unfortunately, the Digital Equity Act and its $2.75 billion of appropriated funding were terminated by executive order, leaving these programs unfunded. Expanding access is the key to health and well-being of rural veterans. Thank you so much, and thank you for having us today.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being here. The written statement of Ms. Raines will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Kirchner, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement.
Good morning, and thank you everyone for taking the time out of your day to listen to my testimony. My name is Kim Kirchner, and I'm a proud veteran who served in the United States Air Force, Illinois Air National Guard, and served in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. I'm currently a sergeant with the Macoupin County Sheriff's Department. I'm writing the testimony in regard to the care that I have received at a compensation and pension exam. I drove over 30 minutes to an exam that the VA scheduled for me with a contract provider. When I arrived, the medical provider informed me that I was not on her schedule and that she couldn't find my medical records. I told her that the VA had called me and asked me to come in at an earlier date due to an opening. She finally found my records, but had an attitude through the entire exam, which lasted a total of 3 minutes. At no time did she conduct a medical exam on me. She only reviewed my medical record. Based on that exam, VA denied my claim. In order to finally get my claim awarded, I had to do a whole nother medical exam. This was a massive waste of my time and taxpayers' money. I firmly believe that I am not the only veteran this has happened to, and the outsourcing of these exams definitely needs to be looked into. When a veteran goes for an exam, they should be treated with the utmost respect they deserve, especially for putting their lives on the line for our country. When I walked out of that exam that didn't last approximately 3 minutes, I have never felt so disrespected in my life. It was very frustrating to get treated this way, especially having to drive 30 minutes to the exam due to living in a small town and nowhere close to a VA clinic. I firmly believe that the VA needs to pay more attention to the care we are receiving from them outsourcing their compensation and pension exams. Thank you, everyone, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kirchner, and thank you for your service then and your service now. And I've heard from other veterans with similar experiences to yours with that compensation and pension. So I want to make sure that we correct that, and I hope your experience since then has been far better and far more respectful. And if not, I know the ranking member and I would be very interested in ensuring that that happens for you going forward. Your written statement will be entered into the hearing record, and again, I appreciate your willingness to come and testify today. Ms. Schauer, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement.
Chairman Barrett, Ranking Member Budzinski, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Christina Schauer. I'm a U.S. Army Iraq War veteran and president of the Tri-State Women Warriors, a nonprofit with a mission to provide connection and advocacy for the unique needs of women veterans and service members. Today, I will focus on 3 key areas of impact for rural veterans: enhanced community outreach, coordinated and purposeful community care utilization, and a strong rural VA presence. Community outreach is vital to ensure veterans understand their benefits, how to access them, and why they matter, especially in isolated rural areas. The VA's Community Engagement and Partnerships for Suicide Prevention program has been essential in supporting local coalitions like ours working to prevent veteran suicide. Our local engagement coordinator has been a behind-the-scenes champion of the Tri-State Women Warriors, which has now served over 100 local women through live events and helped many access VA care for the first time, some for trauma experienced decades ago. These outreach programs serve a vital role in ensuring rural communities stay informed and engaged with the VA. While many of our members prefer VA care, almost all of us have relied on VA community care at some point due to specialty care needs, wait times, or distance. Despite its necessity, community care is not optimized. Research shows that community care clinicians often report learning about policy and workflow changes only through error notifications and request denials, which is consistent with reports we hear from veterans in our community. Any policy change that impacts community care partners, such as the Compact Act, should follow an effective standardized communication process that includes clinical services as well as billing departments to safeguard veteran care and prevent them from receiving medical bills in error. Care continuity is also an ongoing issue. Successful implementation of a comprehensive EHR is paramount to ensure the seamless flow of communication across care teams. Lack of cultural competency has also been a pain point for community care, and unfortunately, initiatives to improve this are resource intensive. With 48% of rural hospitals operating at a financial loss in 2023 and the recent passing of H.R. 1, most rural hospitals are strategizing ways to ensure their doors stay open and would struggle to absorb any additional financial strain. With healthcare viability in mind, it's also important to acknowledge that 92 rural hospitals have closed or have been unable to continue providing inpatient services in the last decade. A recent study showed that even in major cities, average wait times across specialties are increasing, and nearly 62% of mental health provider shortage areas in the United States are rural. Expanding community care without addressing provider shortages could exacerbate current access issues if VA resources are lost within these communities. Our local CBOC is a trusted anchor, and this committee's greatest focus should be ensuring rural veterans have access to VHA's veteran-centered patient care. Research shows rural veterans report higher satisfaction with VA care than community care, and that VA facilities often outperform or match non-VA providers in quality and safety. When a permanent physical VA presence is not possible, strategic telehealth can extend resources and build connections, evaluating when face-to-face interactions are most critical to building trust, and supplementing with telehealth can broaden the Evaluating when face-to-face interactions are most critical to building trust and supplementing with telehealth can broaden the meaningful reach of these CBOCs. Finally, we must protect the psychological safety of the VA workforce, many of whom are veterans themselves. Successful deployment of a modernized EHR will rely heavily on a strong, confident workforce, which is only possible when employees feel valued and supported. This subcommittee is uniquely positioned to lead in expanding VA access to rural veterans through technology. Community care is vital, but history shows that even well-intended privatization can lead to inequitable services for rural communities as resources naturally shift to more profitable urban areas. As we see this disparity in the broader healthcare system today, the VA remains a vital equalizer. A balanced, bipartisan approach can strengthen both VA and community care to ensure our most vulnerable veterans are not forgotten. The VA I returned to in 2004 after my deployment to Iraq as a student on this campus, where I was told by the VA in Danville that my new breathing issues were likely from anxiety, is not the VA we have today. The progress we have made has been intentional and remarkable. Let's continue investing in this transformation and use modern tools to bring care and benefits closer to rural veterans who have earned them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schauer. Appreciate your testimony, and your written statement will be also entered into the hearing record. And we will now proceed to questioning, and I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. And I forgot to advise you ahead of time, but we have a light system here in front of you, green, yellow, and red, pretty self-explanatory. Yellow is you're getting close, and red is you're out of time. So, but we will begin questioning, and genuinely appreciate each of you that are here today and the testimony that you offered today. Ms. Schauer, when were you said you were deployed in Iraq, 03, 04 sometime, and where were you operating out of there?
Baghdad International Airport.
Okay, and what was your job?
I was a combat medic.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you. I was there a few years after you, and certainly appreciate your service there, so thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Kirchner, did you say you were Army as well?
No, sir, Air Force.
Air Force, okay. Yeah, and you were, where were you deployed when you were serving?
Incirlik, Turkey.
Say again?
Incirlik, Turkey.
Okay. I did a kind of a layover there one time. So I was in Guantanamo Bay on my way to Afghanistan. So, but it was great because they had a Taco Bell there. So it was good for morale. So, yeah. And Ms. Raines, I wanted to ask you, I know you mentioned a lot of the access to telemedicine and some of the extension of broadband. You mentioned access to fiber for rural residents. And I live in a pretty rural part of Michigan. In fact, I'm not joking, my neighbors across the street from me are Amish. They're not so into the broadband, but nonetheless, you know, in the community that I live in, we have folks like me that need access to internet and broadband. Do you know you said you had connected about 7,500 homes that way. Do you know what the cost for that 7,500 homes was?
That 7,500 with the 46,000 altogether will be about $350 million. And most of that is, I believe all of that has been fiber, yes. We
Okay.
work with the USDA Rural Development Opportunity Fund, which is in Illinois mostly wireless.
So- How many millions again?
350 million, about, for those were state and federal funds in the first 3 rounds of the Connect Illinois program.
So 350 mil, for how many homes are going to be connected for that?
It's just over 50,000.
Okay. That would be a substantial cost per home with fiber.
Yes.
I guess, Dr. Caboli, maybe you could help me answer this, but is there any opportunity perhaps where we could just outfit veterans who are accessing telehealth with a fixed wireless connection? I have one of those in my home. It works pretty well, actually, and it allows me to use, if I were using telehealth, I can use Zoom. My wife works from home and is able to do her work that way. I feel like for 350 million, we could buy a lot of people a home internet, fixed wireless provider type of thing and pay $50 a month for them and not hit 350 million for a great long time. Either one of you.
Oh, sorry. Wireless internet is an excellent stopgap, yes. So in areas in Illinois, especially where I'm from, down in Crawford County, Robinson, Illinois, there is no cell signal in a lot of the county. So even if you had a hotspot, you aren't able to access it. Wireless internet is coming, but wireless is slower speeds. It is interrupted by any kind of weather, rainstorm or thunderstorms, which are very common on the prairie, as you know.
Yeah.
But it is an opportunity to get people connected faster.
I actually found, I had cable like copper, but it wasn't fiber, but
Right.
it was like a lower speed, but it was into the home through the phone line. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've actually had more reliable service through the Verizon, not just a little hockey puck hotspot that you would take while you're traveling, but like the fixed plug into the wall kind of service that comes over the air.
Yes.
And I feel like delivering to those folks you talk about that are the most stranded, it's going to be a huge expense to run fiber to them. And I almost wonder if we'd be better served putting more of that into some of the more accessible already options available.
The wireless tower that provides the Verizon service is served by fiber middle mile infrastructure. So middle mile infrastructure still needs to go out to provide that wireless service. And fiber optic, of course, is more expensive at the installation. It's also what we call kind of future-proof. It's 50 years is its serviceable life in the ground, and it's still being tested, so it could be even longer than that. As speeds increase over time and technology improvement, the cable does not need to be upgraded, just the data centers on either side, because it carries information at the speed of light.
Sure,
So
just not to cut you off, I just wanted to get
of
Dr.
course.
Caboli's thoughts really quick before I yield to the ranking member, and then we can come back after that. So go ahead.
Yeah, real quickly. I think the other thing to think about is low Earth orbit satellite internet. Now, we looked into this the last couple of years to see if Office of Rural Health could provide that service for veterans. Unfortunately, there's no legislative mandate to allow us or authority to allow us to actually pay for it. Because you're right, the cost per month would be much less if we could just subsidize it, but we can't. But we do have a pilot with a company to sort of identify sort of what the challenges are, because one of the challenges in rural areas is actually the installation. You have to get somebody to come in, drive in, set up the satellite and all that kind of thing. But anyway,
Sure.
I'll stop there, but I think there's a lot of other options out there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to finish, in Illinois and across the country, we're using a mix of technologies, but of course, we're looking towards the future. So that's why we prioritize fiber, but it's definitely going to be a mix of all these things as well as low Earth orbit to deliver service.
Sure. Thank you. I'm going to yield to the ranking member for 5 minutes for her questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first kind of set of questions is really just to the panelists from the VA directly. I'd love to hear from each of your perspectives, just a general question about gaps in care, access to care that you see within the VA, and what those barriers are that exist in filling those gaps, especially in our rural communities, obviously, with the topic today. And then just to ask you, in addition, what kind of feedback you get from veterans as it relates to these gaps and filling them.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. So I would say there are certainly less opportunities for rural veterans, especially the more specialized the services that they are. And so throughout Vision 12, we have a fair amount of rural areas, not only in VA Ileana, but in Iron Mountain particularly, where it's literally a 4.5-hour drive from Sault Ste. Marie, the CBOC, to the main campus. I think when it comes to primary care and mental health treatment, we've both virtual and face-to-face is where we've really been able to close the gap more so. But we are continuing to expand our CBOCs, not only growing them and doing construction, but also trying to create new specialty services there. But certainly across the board, that's why I think community care, as was stated, is so critical, because we can do a lot in the VA. We have a lot of opportunities that we can offer for our vets, but there are some things that we can't. And so having that partnership of community care can really help us. There's a lot of mobile opportunities that we do too, and I think maybe Dr. Caboli could talk a bit more about that.
Okay, so here at VA Ileana, and I actually have spent over 30 years in healthcare, specifically relating to providing services to individuals in rural areas. So rural healthcare is a passion for me. At VA Ileana, we have actually implemented a screening program titled ACORN, which stands for Assessing Circumstances and Offering Resources for Needs. And to speak to some of the testimony that we've already heard, when we've done this screening through our social work team, it really addresses some of the social determinants of health, like food, housing, utilities, transportation, education, employment, digital needs, and the like. We've actually found that 19% of our veterans are positive for digital needs, and another 65% positive for social isolation and loneliness. Since we are a rural Department of Veterans Affairs hospital, we do have, CBOCs spread throughout this area, but we certainly recognize the needs of our veterans to try to remain connected with not only health care, but with one another.
I just want to say, to start out, though, I'm actually from Iowa City, Iowa. I grew up across the river from Illinois and Southeast Iowa, so go Hawks. We have the Big Ten covered here. But I did wear my Illini colors today,
Yes,
just
thank you.
because I knew where I was. No, I think to answer your question about access and gaps, I think it comes down to sort of kind of like Ms. Rain said about you use every possible thing you have. What do we have that we can get veterans access to care? So it's face-to-face care with us, face-to-face care in the community, telemedicine, instant messaging. We have all these things offered out there. And the thing is, not every veteran wants telemedicine. Of veterans that have used telemedicine, 80% say, yes, I want this. 20% say, I tried it, it's not for me. And pretty much all of us had some form of telemedicine during the pandemic. So we've had experiences with it, and really veterans want more telemedicine. But again, what do they want? Let's either bring them to care or bring the care to them.
Yeah. Could I ask just one follow-up question? One thing I've noticed within the district, just within healthcare in general, just even beyond providing care to veterans, is we lack the ability to attract specialty care, healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, and so we have a shortage of healthcare professionals just within our hospital systems. Is that reflected as well at the VA in Danville, that you have those shortages or a hard time kind of attracting those professionals?
We have very similar challenges to what are experienced in the private sector and the community care network, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If I can add to that, I think one of the things that we do have is because we're a national network of providers, we actually don't have a shortage, say, of primary care providers. Even though there's shortages everywhere, we just don't have them all in the right places at the right time. And so, like you were talking about PAC teams and how many providers they have, we can supplement that through the Clinical Resource Hub program. So we can supplement primary care, mental health, specialty care. So a nephrologist in Boston who has extra effort to give can provide care in rural Illinois. And that's
telehealth.
by telehealth.
Yeah,
yes.
telehealth is key to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go ahead and yield back.
Sure, thank you. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. And I know a couple of you, I think Mr. Lawson and Ms. Schauer, you mentioned the electronic health record upgrades that are necessary to kind of integrate that community care and VA care together, because oftentimes veterans will, even if they're using community care, will also have a segment of their health care through VA. And that's been a major subject of consideration by our subcommittee. I feel like it's taken up 80% of my life these days. But if you can give us any of your perspective as to your expectations for that. I know this, Cerner has now been acquired by Oracle. The VISN that I live in, and specifically in Michigan, is the next region to receive this update, and it's frankly not gone well in the places it's been rolled out in the past, minus the exception here in Illinois. And curious if you have any thoughts on how that will take place, and what would be things we ought to look for on this committee to make sure that it is done appropriately.
Yes, when we think about those electronic health records, even speaking from the private sector experience in my previous life before the superintendency here, the systems do not talk with one another. So you might have one healthcare facility using I don't want to endorse any places here, but Epic, and then one maybe on Cerner. Those two hospitals might even be owned by the same ownership group, but don't communicate with one another with those records because they don't intermix. So I think what we'd be looking here is, we look to like software service type of mechanisms to where maybe providers might be provided login access, something along those lines, to direct access those records from the VA. On the software rollout from Oracle and Cerner, we did get an update about that last week at the NAC VSO annual conference, and when we think about those records coming in from the active duty component of the U.S. Armed Forces, it is happening. It seems or appears, or we've been told, that those bugs have been worked out. Time will tell. However, we're looking at 18 months to 24 months of full rollout. And Illinois is not among the next states, by the way. We'd like to see that happen. So that really kind of covers that active duty component. I think what we really need to really focus on is how do we make access for those community care providers, either through a software service platform or some other type of agreement with those providers.
So you're saying instead of like sending the file back and forth, having an access portal for the community care providers to access your VA record.
Yes.
And make maybe even some edit privileges to that for the community care work that's being done.
Correct. Very similar how a VSO has VBMS access. I
Sure.
can get in there and I can kind of see what's going on with a case file. I think something very similar to that, but with a bit more privilege, from a provider end to add to
Sure.
and edit.
Sure. Very good. Ms. Schauer, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that yourself.
So my background is nursing, not IT, and so I want to give that caveat. But as a clinician, just being able to access the records you need when you need them is especially helpful. And it goes two ways. It's the VA EHR, but then also figuring out with the community care, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Everybody's working on different systems, and so making sure it works with a variety of systems. Another additional thing that just to point out, I know up until recently we did have an EHR change in my organization, but when that interoperability is not there, sometimes it does rely on actually making a phone call to the CBOC or to the primary care team, which that relies on that CBOC being open. So weekends, holidays, nights, you don't always have that ability to access those records.
Yeah.
If this was ever a possibility, I would love to see a future where not only do we ensure that any veteran that's eligible for community care receives the information about what they're eligible for and where they can go, but alternatively, we have a lot of veterans that are not using their VA care. They're using the community on their private insurance. They may not have any awareness. I would love to see some way for some sort of integration that would allow community providers to easily screen and then refer to VA when somebody meets those criteria.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I actually, one of the bills that I introduced was the Veterans Community Care Scheduling Improvement Act to allow for that integration with community care providers within the VA so that they could see that matrix of what is available. And one of the revisions we made to that bill was a requirement that if a veteran called for a scheduled appointment, they would be advised of both options available to them so that they would know what is available, so that they would then be able to choose between, I'm willing to travel a little bit further to get an appointment maybe sooner, or I'm going to stay closer for an appointment a little bit later, or just that entire decision matrix that they may have. Or maybe they're like a lot of folks in my district who travel to Florida in the wintertime and they spend part of their time there, part of their time in Michigan, and having, other options available to them is really something that's important. So we are working through a lot of this electronic health record, tangled issue right now, but I know, Mr. Lawson, you pointed out in your testimony just that certainty that if you have, for example, a referral for a critical need, that it's not getting lost in that gap perhaps before this is fully integrated, so that we know if you send a referral for a test or a service, that it's going to be received on the other end and actioned appropriately in a timely way to make sure that it's not falling through the cracks. So appreciate that, and I want to yield to the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Great, thank you again. My next question, Mr. Lawson, actually, we could spend probably this entire hearing talking about healthcare, but I do want to talk about access to benefits. And so I just was curious if you could speak a little bit to that and what you're hearing from your fellow service members just about access to benefits, barriers to that, challenges with it in our more rural communities, obviously.
Sure. I think the first priority is ensuring that we've got access to accredited veteran service officers for these veterans in rural areas. In my office, we are going through quite a bit of a transformation to make ourselves available to veterans wherever they may be. We even service veterans outside of our county. We've got clients as far away as Ireland that we're able to do remotely, work through the claims process with them. Part of what we do is educating veterans on that, but they have to be into the system first. So if you've not entered the VA system, meaning that you've not applied for a VA home loan, if you've not entered VA care, if you've not used education benefits, you're not counted and you're not in the system. We need to make sure that you're enrolled and counted in the system. One, it gives our VA administrative staff and planning staff some better head count of numbers, so we know where to center our care and where to look to build facilities or expand out options. But for us, the challenge is especially as we stand up here in Illinois, our Veterans Assistance Commissions, making sure that we've got an accredited veteran service officer in every county. These veteran service officers are free for the veteran to use. They should use free veteran services officers at all times and never pay for the service. That is a benefit that they've earned, and they should not be charged to access it, and that's that.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things we've tried to do in my office is host resource center, resource fairs, connecting veterans to the VA, to services, and it's challenging. It's challenging to, we did it at one of our community colleges not far from here, and we had light attendance. So any observations or kind of suggestions you might have on how we can better connect?
That's one thing we've been wrestling with. We attended one of your resource fairs recently as well at the Legion in Edwardsville. And we've noticed that as well, that the resource fairs, the face of the veteran is changing. We have to look at the demographics of these veterans, how they access care, how they consume information. Resource fairs used to work back when the internet didn't exist. Now that veteran has more access to information through their handheld computer on their phone than they ever will at a resource fair. But there is so much, as Congressman Barrett mentioned, so many groups out there that are trying to do good things. It's just not a very coordinated effort, in my opinion, that we need to figure out what that next generation of outreach is. Is it through social media? Is it through other platforms? It's just it takes money, quite honestly, to commit to those types of things. So we're looking and exploring how do we offer these things or these services or education opportunities in a more modern setting to appeal to the OIF generation, which is ours and currently in the most need for care at this point.
I'd love to keep working with you on that to figure that out, for sure.
We'd be happy to.
Thank you. Dr. Williams, I wanted to ask, I know you're currently the Medical Center Director up in Chicago at the Jesse Brown VA MC. And so I was just wondering if you could maybe, since we're talking about rural healthcare, obviously Chicago not being rural, if you could kind of just talk to us a little bit about, as you're practicing working up north, kind of the comparison between resources, any things you see different between what can be offered in a community that's more rural, the challenges or the lesser of the resources that might be down here, or maybe we have adequate, same amount of resources in Chicago, but I was just curious if you could reflect on that.
Actually, what is very interesting about my time at Chicago is that the Jesse Brown VA actually hosts the clinical resource hub for Vision 12.
Oh, okay.
And so some of the rural health care that Dr. Kaboli was mentioning being provided through the clinical resource hub, I see the opposite end of that care. So I see those providers and those specialists in my role as the medical center director at Jesse Brown. And then I see my home site, VA Ileana, as a consumer of those services. And that partnership with the clinical resource hub is critical. There are some, obviously differences between urban and rural health care. And one other noticeable difference is the relationship or affiliations with the educational institutions in the different communities. Because a larger VA medical center obviously has typically a broader range of services, including specialties, there's a much tighter relationship with their academic affiliate. We do have a great partnership down here at VA Ileana with the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, so we're very fortunate for that, but it's a different relationship than what I see in Chicago.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'll yield back.
Sure, thank you. And I wanted to follow up a little bit more, Dr. Zomchek, about the EPS scheduling and how that has been integrated. I know it's not fully at every facility yet. I'm curious, in your vision, where it's being used and how it's being utilized, and if you have any feedback for us as to how that's going in its real application sense now.
Yes, thanks for that question. EPS, I'm well aware of it. Part of being the governance board that's been discussed for a number of months now, and so I've been involved in those discussions and in the rollout, kind of input about the planning. At this point, we don't have any of our 8 facilities in Vision 12 that are in the pilot, as you had mentioned. However, I think it's a great thing. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to provide more resources and access for our vets and timeliness. I mean, literally, it's moving appointment scheduling from days or weeks in some cases to the period of minutes. So I'm encouraged about it, but I do think it's a double-sided coin idea in terms of implementation, right? You really need the local medical center to be, engaged in opening up those clinic slots, but you also need the community partner and a connection like CEO to CEO to open up those grids and then kind of get proof of concept so that it can be expanded.
Sure. For those that may be here today unfamiliar, it would basically, when you call to schedule an appointment, often in community care, I had this example happen to me. I had an audiology appointment, and they had to first call me and get my availability, then call these other providers that were available, then call me back, and they scheduled it at a time I told them I wasn't available. And then they told me, well, when that happens, we just schedule you for the next appointment if we can't meet your timeline that you're available. And I'm like, well, I'm literally going to be out of the state. I'm going to be in Washington, D.C., and you scheduled me an appointment in Michigan at the same time. And it was a very significant hassle. And so I think having that real-time awareness so you're not going through that game of telephone is really critically important. And so I think you're right, though. You need both the VA scheduler as well as the community care provider to opt into that meshing of information so that scheduling is going to be available for people. And they can know what's close to home, what's available, and what am I willing to travel farther for, or what's nearby and timely and everything else. And I think that's an important thing that we've got to kind of pull together, basically. Dr. Kaboli, on that piece of it, have you, and maybe, I'm not sure if you have awareness of this, do you feel like there is that awareness and buy-in by potential community care partners when we offer this to them, that they have that willingness to participate?
Absolutely. So our office has followed the external provider scheduling program for the last 3 years, and we've worked, for example, with the Nebraska Rural Health Association, because they're really tied into the rural communities, and saying, we will partner with you to make sure that they're on the grids. Because like you said, if the scheduler has access to both grids at that exact moment in time when they're on the phone with the veteran, they can say, we can get you into the VA in 32 days, or we can get you into this other clinic in 47 days. Which would you rather have? Or, and so I think if it works half as well as we hope it does, it'll still be good. But I think, I think they're up to what? There were 4,000 appointments made last month in June.
Mm-hmm.
So it's ramping up quickly. So I think it'll prove to be mutually beneficial,
Yeah.
and that's where it'll work.
And I'm not sure if this is a best question for you or not, but the community care partners, do you feel that they feel like they are getting I mean, everybody always wants a greater reimbursement, but do you feel it at least is a market reimbursement rate that is something that will draw in community care partnerships?
Yeah, so we've gone around and met with community, partners, and I still practice in Iowa, and I talk to these other providers all the time, and they're happy with the rates that we provide. It's just you have to make it easy. The harder you make it, especially, with record exchange, the harder we make it, it just becomes a hassle. But I think they're really committed to the veterans in their community, and I've never heard anybody in the community ever say, you know what, taking care of veterans is not a priority for us. They always want to care for veterans.
Yeah, and we want to draw in the best that we can by having a reimbursement rate that's reflective of the service that's provided, that does that, to really strengthen those particularly rural community partners that we have. So thank you. I can yield to the ranking member. Do you have other questions? Go ahead.
I was just going to follow up on telehealth, actually, and maybe ask Dr. Zomchek. When you're talking about telehealth and using it specifically for mental health challenges, do you find that there are still a lot of barriers around stigma related to seeking this care, barriers to, a veteran coming in person or utilizing telehealth? Is telehealth making it more easily accessible for a veteran that might be trying to get over a stigma about seeking that care?
Well, I think first of all, VA care and mental health is second to none. I think the plethora of services that we offer and modalities that we offer it mitigates stigma that historically was there. I think it's still there, certainly, and I think candidly, I think it's part of the disease process to some extent for people to be reluctant to seek care when they really need it. And so I think, we will never stop in terms of that outreach and finding connectivity for our vets, whether it's through VVC or coming to a local CBOC and using telehealth, or one of the programs that we have related to this broadband discussion we've been having is what we call the Digital Divide Program, and that's where we've literally issue VA-loaned iPads, tablets that have internet connectivity for veterans that are in rural areas who can't afford it, and then that gives them the ability to connect with their clinician at their kitchen table.
Right.
And we've distributed thousands of those across the network.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Can I open the question up to I know we have a number of veterans, obviously, on the panel, specifically around barriers, anything you could speak to as far as barriers that we can help overcome in helping connect veterans to telehealth services, mental health services?
So I think when we think about the telehealth services, I've used telehealth, mental health even, I'm not even ashamed to admit it, and it was wonderful. It worked. I'm at work. I'm a working adult. I'm still in the workforce. And I think sometimes there is this misconception that, oh, you can just take off work to go to an appointment. Here in Illinois, we've got legislation pushing forward to kind of help those veterans take some extra time off, compensated to go to these appointments for service-related conditions. But a lot of this is going to come on educating, especially for some of our older veterans that are just not quite at the technology level maybe some of us are. We're still seeing Vietnam-era veterans that are now coming in for the first time for PTSD. It breaks your heart to see them dealing with that for so long. But we've got to figure out ways to also, as we issue out those iPads and pieces of technology, how do we educate them to use it? One of the things we do in our office is, when they come to see us for claims, do you have VA.gov app on your phone? Most veterans do have phones at this point, even the older ones. So how do we educate them to use that VA app? They can communicate with their primary care provider on there. They can retrieve records, letters, medical records, decision notices. They get notices for appointments coming up on their app. It's really a great tool, and we really do love that app. It's just, again, how do we educate those veterans on using it? So making sure that we've got access, critical, but also education on how to use the tool.
Any other? Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the biggest barriers I see is just a lack of awareness of eligibility. I think that the veterans that are within the VA somehow or have ever been connected to the VA will get some information, and you can access so much information on the internet, but it's almost too much. It's hard to digest. You don't know what's worth going after, and not everybody even realizes that it's something that they should pursue. So I think, again, that outreach is so important, and going to where the veterans are. We find a lot of luck meeting women veterans in places like the farmers market, like places just that veterans are, versus having a fair where they come to you. Because if I don't believe, we have a lot of veterans that don't even understand that they are a veteran. They don't identify as a veteran. And so that resource fair to them is not for them. And so finding ways to meet the veterans where they are and make sure that you have those conversations about what you are eligible for. Most of our women, that's why they have now gotten VA care, is because they learned that they could. They didn't even know that it was a possibility before.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and yield back.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for that. I think you're right. I think it speaks to a thing. Prior to coming to Congress, I was in the state legislature in Michigan, and we would always model our outreach, and instead of asking, are you a veteran? Because you're right, people will self-select out of that definition. You ask, did you ever serve in the military? And then you kind of can explore that from there. But it's hard to hold a resource fair and advertise it as, did you ever serve in the military fair? So it's a little bit harder to package. But I think it is part of that, going where people are instead of expecting them to come to us. I think there's a lot of, part of this is an inertia thing. Like you get started, you begin unpacking some of this, and then you work through the process and maybe obtain the benefits that you've kind of had on the back burner. Life comes at you, you're transitioning to civilian life, things are difficult. It's like being in a batting cage and you're figuring out how to get stood up again. And then you think you'll worry about it later, and then life comes in and you have a lot of other priorities. Even for our Vietnam generation coming home, they were treated so poorly when they came back that many of them just kind of packed it away, and then life took over, and then they moved to a different phase of life, and those things they had tried to pack away become to kind of percolate back out. And I really hope, and I think we are making the strident effort of making up the lost ground that we had with that generation, because they truly did suffer unnecessarily. And I think I will say, I'm grateful that generation made sure that our generation was welcomed back respectfully and with the dignity that all veterans deserve. And I think that each of our Vietnam veterans are owed a great deal of appreciation for that. Mr. Kirchner, I wanted to ask you a question. Since your really tragic experience with that provider, have you found, or have you gone back into any community care services? What has your experience been like more recently, and can you give us any insight into how that may or may not have improved and where you think those improvements ought to go.
Sure. First of all, community care, excellent. Excellent. Every time they call about the appointment, like you said, we'll get back with you 24, 48 hours. It's within 10 minutes they're calling. You know, they're bringing their A game. Where I see that could be a benefit for the veterans and the VA is if I'm going to an audiology appointment, I want my records to be reviewed by an audiologist, not a heart doctor or a person that's had the training. I don't believe the people that are doing these exams are the right people doing the exams. I think that's where
You're talking for the compensation and pension?
Correct.
Okay, not the community care
No,
ongoing
the
medical.
community care, they're
yeah.
doing everything to get you there.
Sure,
They're,
sure.
You know, that's where community care is on top of their game. I think
Yeah.
that's where it's falling apart is whenever community care is done, that's
Yeah.
where it's falling off the board.
We'll take that back because I'm not sure sitting here what the qualifications for those delegated outsourced, compensation and benefit exams, what a requirement is for that person to be. I'm sure they have to be a medical doctor, but I'm not sure in which specialty or what that would involve. So we'll take that back for consideration for some questions to VA about that. So I appreciate your insight there. And Dr. Zomchek, one thing, I know you talked about outreach with mental health and that being important, and I think that is a continuing effort we have to keep working toward. One population that we found some success in Michigan was actually reaching out to spouses of veterans as well, because oftentimes they are observing the behavioral challenges that veterans may have in a more intimate setting back home that they're not displaying out in public at their job, or they're taking that hardship back home with them. And I think that outreach to the spouses of saying, hey, here are some benefits that may be available to your loved one, may be that soft encouragement that they need to make the decision to come in to receive the help that they should have and certainly have earned. And I don't know if that's anything you've explored at all, or if it's worthy of your consideration or not.
Yes, that's a great point. We know the connectivity with our veterans is often with family members, often children, could be a neighbor. I think as I hear this discussion about outreach and connectivity with our veterans, of course, we have telehealth coordinators, we have people to talk and to train and to teach our veterans and family members, but I really think that a multifaceted approach is what's needed. There can be some of these standardized approaches that we're doing, but what I've seen in my network is I have very rural and very urban centers, and even some of the hospitals that are very urban have very rural CBOCs. And so having a group, each of the facilities does, I think, a great job of even with town hall meetings in reaching out and opening up our connections. Sometimes it's in person, sometimes it's with Facebook, but whenever possible, we certainly invite spouses and family members to be involved in the care, so long as it's, it's okay from a
Sure.
health information standpoint.
Do you know of any way that we've kind of tried to do the direct outreach to the spouses or near close family members of veterans, with resources from the VA to encourage them to try and encourage their veteran loved one to explore their benefits?
I'd have to take that back, and
Okay.
I'd be happy to follow up with you about any specific program or initiative about that.
Sure.
I think mostly what we do is it's all encompassing, so
Yeah.
all of the outreach that we do, we do not turn down if someone is asking about their father or mother
Right.
or sibling.
Yeah, I just think it might be a useful inroad with veterans. It turns out I have a wife and she thinks I'm rather stubborn, so maybe I'm the only one, I don't know. But thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Ranking Member Bazinski, go ahead.
Sure, I just had a final question for Ms. Schauer. I was wondering if you could speak about specifically women veterans, and we've had a lot of conversation obviously focused on rural healthcare, but I think that those challenges to access for women is probably greater. But I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to that experience.
Yeah, our women veteran population, of course, we have a lot of unique needs. Military sexual trauma is probably one of the most prominent, though not isolated to women veterans, a higher percentage of women veterans. What I find in our community is hesitance towards using the VA because of experiences they had 10, 20 years ago, when you dig into it. And so just trying to encourage them that today's VA is different and you're in a place where you'll be welcomed. And once they try it again, they see and they believe and they socialize it with each other. But I think it's getting them in that door. And I think the social isolation that you're talking about, I want to learn more about that program because that's really why our community was created, and hearing about the high suicide rates for women veterans, which as a nurse, having been a nurse for 15 years at that point, I was completely unaware of. And when we started our group, we had immediate energy behind it, and it just keeps growing, and it just shows that need for people. And often it does take asking them 2, 3, 4 times to come. But once they come, they're like so excited for the next meetup. So I do think women have unique needs that have gone a little bit unnoticed and unrecognized for a while. And I'm really happy that today's VA is seeing that and addressing that.
Thank you very much. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, thank you, and appreciate that insight as well. And I think maybe doing some public service outreach to women to really like having firsthand testimonials of women who've come back and now receive care at the VA to advocate for other women to, hey, this isn't, number one, this isn't the military. Whatever trauma you may have experienced there is not, I get that this is still the United States government, and there is a hill we have to climb to reestablish trust in many ways. But this is not the same VA that may have been unprepared during those early days of the war on terror and the war in Iraq, and coming back home in a lack of capacity and understanding, and kind of a little bit of a legacy VA that is since transformed, and through a lot of work that was done and paths that were forged by women like yourself and other veterans coming back home, and advocates like many of you here, and folks that work within the VA. So we appreciate your work doing that. I now want to yield to the ranking member for your closing statement.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say again, thank you for coming to the 13th District. I really appreciate that. Thank you to all the panelists. This was very informative on the work that we have ahead of us back in Washington. I really appreciate all of your time in making the trip here. As the ranking member on the subcommittee with Chairman Barrett on tech and modernization, it was great to hear some of that conversation and how that's integrated into the rural experience for our veterans. I think we both know we have a long way to go, and we're a partner in that work because it is just so critical, whether it's scheduling or the electronic health record system. Getting that fully operational within the VA is something that's critically important and will be to the benefit of the services that the veterans so well deserve. So thank you again for being here. To the veterans, thank you for your service. And I'll yield back to the chairman.
Thank you. And thank you, Ranking Member Baczynski, for hosting us today, and for allowing me to see a little bit of a glimpse of your district, and appreciate the both similarities and some of the differences between communities that we represent and how things are done. And I really can't say enough about how impressed I am by this facility, the outreach that is done, and the success stories that you've all had, and the work that's ongoing that you're doing. And kind of like we talked about earlier, Colonel, allowing veterans to find that next sense of real purpose. And I appreciate the work that you're doing here to make that happen. And one thing that I think can give us some really focused motivation for this is there's statistics around this. Of course, during that 20-year-long span of the war on terror, we had just over 7,000 troops die on the battlefield. Every single one of them is an absolute tragedy. I have friends that, and many of us who served have friends that were lost in that effort. We lost 35,000 more to suicide during the same period of time. And that really, to me, speaks about that the real total human cost of war that we have yet to fully appreciate. And we have a lot further to go in that, and how we can prevent those, each of which are preventable with the right intervention and the right outreach and the right care and treatment. So that is a real mission of what we on this committee are focused on. And a piece of that is this technology aspect of how we deliver benefits to veterans and how we really do a better job of making sure that they have the adequate access that they've all earned to really head off at the next veteran who may be going down that path. And then also looking at veterans who aren't contemplating suicide but still need help for the back injury they sustained or the other service-connected conditions they may be facing or dealing with. What education benefits do they have that are available to them? What, compensation and benefits are available for that continuation? And all of the other services that VA provides that are really, truly important and fall under this rather broad umbrella of the subcommittee and the work that we do. So I can't tell you how much we appreciate each of you being, really on-the-ground advocates and with the firsthand knowledge and experience that you have of how we go about that. Washington, D.C. is an 11-hour drive from here because we almost had to drive because of the weather with the flights yesterday. But it is a long ways away from here, and it's a long ways away from everyday America. But these are the communities that we represent. And I say this in my own district. It's my job to be my district's representative in Washington, D.C., not Washington's representative back home in my district. And that should really be a one-way street where we take our voices of our constituents and the folks that we represent and go advocate for them in our nation's capital and not come back here and tell you, well, this is how it really works and you just got to get on board with it. That's not the role of Congress, and that's never going to be what we do on this subcommittee. So this field hearing today really allows us to gather that insight from all of you here and take this with us back to our nation's capital to really do our best and strive to make the best public policy that we can on behalf of our veterans and on behalf of the communities that we represent. So I thank you again for hosting us today, and we look forward to welcoming you to Michigan in the future to do another hearing in my district. And certainly for those of you that have further insight or thoughts for us, we welcome your insight. And if you make it to Washington, we'd love to have you in our hearing there as well. So thank you again to everyone. Thank you to the staff, both committee staff on both sides, as well as the staff for arranging all of this, for those that were here providing other services, for hosting us today. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. With that, I will ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. And without objection, it is so ordered, and this hearing is adjourned.